Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, insurance broker to the stars. If you're an SMB business owner out there, my goal here today is to save you from yourself. It is to give you a better basis to make an educated decision when it comes to spending on cybersecurity. So we're talking about the cyber insurance mirage and why cybersecurity must come first. Now, that may sound a little odd where the insurance guy is saying, hey, you need to spend more money. You need to take a harder look at cybersecurity. But as we go through this, I think it's going to become apparent on why I'm telling you these things. All right, before we begin, we are sponsored by CRD and Aston Lawyers for the Situation and Aston Ferraro International Strategic Advisors. Please check them out after this video. Now, if you don't know me, here's why I think I have a basis to actually make this particular argument. Now, I'm a former IT. That's why I'm particularly passionate about cybersecurity. I have a bachelor's in robotics from the United States Naval Academy. I have a master's in law and cybersecurity law from the Carey School of Law. I believe I'm the best-selling author in the nation on the topic of cyber insurance and cybersecurity law. And I've been doing cyber insurance for roughly a decade now. So I've got a lot that I can stand on to make these arguments. All right, if you're interested, here's some of my books, just to add to the bona fides here. But let's start off with what I tell all of my cyber insurance clients. And this may sound a little tongue-in-cheek, but stick with me. A good year is when I talk to you once and I take your money. That's a great year for you. A bad year for you is if we're talking twice. Because I work in the world of doom and gloom, and you're probably not calling me to tell me good news. It's, hey, you're having a terrible day, it's about to be a worse week, and your month is going to be pretty awful, and you'll see moving forward, you might even have a really stressful year or couple years in the future, all right? So some sage advice from my grandfather. He once asked me when I was a kid, he goes, how do you know for certain if someone is telling you the truth? And the answer was, if it's against their direct financial interest to do so. Why do I say that? The better your cybersecurity, the lower your premiums are going to be. The less likely you're going to get hit with a cyber event, which is going to skyrocket your premiums. All of that is to say, I end up making less money the better your cybersecurity is. The odds you have an event go down, the odds that you get shoehorned into a specific very expensive insurer goes down. So it really is in your best interest to have great cybersecurity. Now keep in mind, none of this is going to get easier. So if you're not where you think you need to be right now, or you're not where you need to be, please go out, speak to your IT folks, ask your MSP, hey, what's the biggest bang for the buck? You don't have to be a cybersecurity expert. That's what they specialize in. My tree guy, hey, I don't know the first thing about trees. He comes out, he can tell me every little bit about trees and what type of tree that is and how long it'll live and if something's wrong with it, etc. Things I would never notice, but that's why I pay him good money to cut down trees around my house. Now keep in mind, when I say this isn't going to get any easier, it absolutely will not. We are losing the cybersecurity war, I think, by just about every metric here. Now, why is that? Think about it just practically. If you're a smart kid in some third world country or some country that has a non-extradition treaty, in a day, you could make more than every single one of your ancestors combined. And the odds that we find you and we extradite you and we bring you to the United States and you get prosecuted and you get sentenced and you go to jail is almost zero. So they have effectively all the incentive to do bad things, which means we as business owners need to fight against that. Now, ultimately, what are the four main reasons I think you should have better cybersecurity? What do I want to teach you here? One, the cyber insurance market is changing. It's changing rapidly, and there are very specific exclusions coming out that totally make sense from the insurance company and industry perspective that you need to start planning for. Two, changes in the legal landscape is happening at breakneck speed, and that could be exceedingly expensive for you. 3, those intra-breach stressors. So obviously over roughly a decade, I've dealt with many cyber events, and I have seen the other side of what happens once some business figures out they've got a cyber event going on. So I want to bring up some of those questions that you've probably never thought about for the post-breach stressors, because those will really get you as well. All right. Now, just to begin with, possibly a stupid question here, but hey, did you read your policy? All right. As one court stated, when a court is reviewing claims under an insurance policy, it must hold you bound by clear and conspicuous provisions in the policy, even if evidence suggests that you did not read or understand them. So ignorance is no excuse. Next, the law is well settled that it is your obligation to read and examine your insurance policy to determine the extent of coverage. That's from Understanding Insurance Law 6th edition. Now, obviously, that's really hard to do because, well, I do cyber insurance. You don't do cyber insurance. You are probably running a business doing many other wonderful things. But here it's saying, hey, you have to read it. They're going to hold your feet to the fire. So you need to understand what you're looking at. Please do not be that business that calls me after you have a cyber claim denied. I get those on a fairly regular basis where something has gone sideways, the limit's not enough, they don't understand what's going on, they find my videos and they call me. Okay, so please do not be that person. Now next, maybe you're asking, well, hey, isn't that what the insurance guy is for? Aren't they supposed to read and understand this stuff? Well, once again, the default rule is that agents and brokers have no duty to advise insureds about the adequacy or appropriateness of the insurance coverage they purchase or about optional coverage that might be available. So let's just break this down into brass tacks. If you're an SMB watching this, let's imagine you get $1 million policy and it's, $2,500 a year. Well, the actual agency that you bought that from, they might make 10%. So that's $250 pre-tax. Now, the actual contact you have there, your insurance guy, he might only make half of that. So it's $125 pre-tax. Or put it another way, it's about $2 a page is what he's looking at. So to do this stuff the right way, one, you really got to love it. It's just been a labor of love for me for a decade. Two, you need to understand IT. You need to understand insurance law. You need to understand cybersecurity law and regulations. Any one of those three, you can make more money doing standalone than trying to combine them all together into cyber insurance. So you are fighting an uphill battle here as a business owner. Next, changes in the cyber insurance policies. And these might surprise you, but from an insurance industry perspective, they totally make sense. First, you ever wondered why your MSP is always harping about patch management and they talk to you at your business reviews about patch management and when they're patching stuff, etc.? It's because of something like this, critical vulnerability exclusions. An example I saw in a recent policy was, hey, if you have a CVE with a CVSS of 8 or greater, you have 14 days to implement that patch. And if a bad guy gets in because you didn't implement that patch, they might just deny your entire claim, in which case you are in for a world of hurt that I do not want you to experience. Okay? So this isn't to say you need to know where to find CVEs and what the CVSS is, but it does mean, if your nephew's doing your computer networks and he's just in there every couple of weeks, that may not cut it. You could be setting yourself up for disaster. If you already have an MSP, ask them about patch management. See how it's going, all right? Next, legacy hardware and software exclusions. This is when hardware and software is no longer supported. It's not being updated. It's not being patched. So why would the insurance industry say, hey, you know what, we'll fit the bill because you just don't want to foot the bill on the front end? They don't want to do that. So I've already seen these on policies. I think these are going to become very, very standard, effectively ubiquitous in the next couple of years. Next, 0-day exclusions. Hey, you get hit with some vulnerability that nobody knows exists. Well, that's why your MSP is harping on internal controls and network segmentation and all these fancy things. trying to stop it or limit the spread as much as possible. If you get hit with a 0-day and your insurance simply will not provide coverage, well, now it's a cybersecurity issue, isn't it? Next, widespread event exclusions. Cyber insurers, well, the deep dark secret here is they don't really know what they're doing because the threats keep changing and they're rapidly evolving. And they're trying to look at historical data for things that are going to occur in the future, and that's really hard to do in this particular area. So widespread event exclusion, hey, maybe you think you have a $5 million policy, but then tucked away on page 65 of 70, you could have this widespread event exclusion endorsement that says, well, if we kind of judge this to be a widespread event, we don't want our insurance company to go bankrupt. So if it reaches such and such a threshold, maybe you had $5 million, but now you only have $2.5 million, and maybe your deductible was $10,000 and now it's $100,000. You don't want to be in that position because obviously you bought that insurance for a very specific reason, and you hopefully bought that limit for a very specific reason. So that could leave you with potentially huge sums of uninsured losses. So you don't want to be in that position. Next, updated cyber war exclusions. Now, I won't harp too much on this. I have a whole video on this on my YouTube channel. But suffice to say, this is one of the top 3 concerns of the cyber insurance industry right now, following the NotPetya issue back in, I believe, 2017. That's been ironed out. So they're continuing to add these updated cyber war exclusions. You need to understand what that means, or you could just get blindsided when, what are the odds right now that 2 nation states would be going to war, and some of them happen to be very deep into the offensive cyber operations. There's just some spillover, you get hit, and then potentially you have no coverage there. So in that case, hey, I hope those internal controls that your MSP implemented were robust enough to try and save you from that type of issue. Next, hey, did you know that sometimes paying the ransom could be illegal? And yeah, there's a waiver, but they specifically stated, this is U.S. Department of Treasury, Office of Foreign Asset Control, there's a presumption of denial. So if you ever wondered why your MSP is saying, hey, we need to have multiple backups, we need to have immutable backups, we need to have stuff that's offline, we need to have more frequent backups, that's why they're telling you that, because if you get hit, and it's common, bad guys try to encrypt backups first. Why? Well, it encourages you to pay the ransom. But if you just happen to get hit by somebody who's on that OFAC sanctions list, everything's encrypted and you can't pay the ransom, your business could effectively just cease to exist. All right? So all of a sudden, the monthly cost of immutable backups sure as heck looks pretty good to you, doesn't it? Next, social engineering scams. Man, we're seeing a ton of these going on right now. So what are cyber insurance companies doing? They're saying, hey, we want pre-established, policies, procedures, controls, etc. in place before money goes out the door. Now, some of these, I just spoke about this last week, they're saying, hey, that manual dealing with the verification has to have been followed before they will reimburse you. You don't want to find that out when $250,000 just went out the door and suddenly your cyber insurance policy isn't going to be the one that's paying for that loss. Okay? Now, that's just to say that I'm sure there's plenty of other crazy exclusions out there. They just haven't come across my desk yet. So this is not an all-inclusive list. Please read your cyber insurance policy. If you see something that just sounds weird or very restrictive, hey, talk to your insurance guy. That's what we're for. We should be adding value here. Next, insurers are demanding increased controls. And I will say, I know a lot of these underwriters across many, many cyber insurers, they may not even know until the boss man comes to them and they say, hey, all right, today we are now requiring companies of this size in this industry to have XYZ controls, or we will not bind their policy. This is just an example here from, this is probably 5 years ago, just to give you a historic example to show you this has been around a while, where here they're saying, hey, you have to have cloud-based backups or you get a ransomware sublimit. And I believe that ransomware sublimit, the total that they would cover was like $25,000. which is frankly a drop in the bucket and pretty terrible. So this particular example, they're looking for cloud-based backups. They were also looking for MFA, for access to email systems. All right, very, very common. We're also seeing, even some of the kind of just real go-to SMB cyber insurers, where all of a sudden they're saying, hey, we want to know if they have EDR. We want to know if they have SEG. Don't put yourself in a position where you just can't even get good quotes because you don't have the right cybersecurity controls in place. Also, don't be in a position where you've been slacking off on cybersecurity, you haven't been answering your MSP's emails or phone calls, you kind of sloughed off the business review with those guys. And then, hey, 2 weeks before renewal, your cyber insurer goes, well, now we want the additional 5 controls. You have to evidence that before we're going to bind your policy. 1, it's going to be way more expensive to do it. 2, it's hard to, have that influx of cash going to an MSP in that short of order. And 3, you're really risking a period of time where you just won't have cyber insurance. All right. So don't put yourself in that position. Next, regulators are also demanding increased controls. So I say this with love in my heart that you probably have no clue what cybersecurity laws apply to you. And I say that with love in my heart because, man, I don't even know. And I nerd out on this stuff. And I've read all 50 state and territory breach notification laws and all the federal stuff. And you can find it in my books. And I think it's super fascinating. But these things are changing so fast. You don't want to be in a position where some state attorney general comes knocking on your door with regulatory fines and penalties, which, by the way, I have no idea if those are insurable or not. It depends on your policy. It depends on the jurisdiction. It depends on what type of claims they bring against you. So you don't want to be in that position. You should also know as a business owner that the breach notification law that generally applies after a breach, it centers on where your client is a resident of, not necessarily where your business office is located. So what does that mean to you? Maybe you're next to a military base. You might have to deal with all 50 different state and territory breach notification laws, which is a giant spider work of insanity. And many of those laws also have data security requirements built into them. So you don't want to find out that, oh man, we just had a couple clients that were Massachusetts residents. And now all of a sudden, the AG of Massachusetts is coming saying, well, hey, there were 18 different administrative, technical, and physical safeguards that you were supposed to have in place before this event occurred. So now we want you to prove it to us. And if you don't, we are going to hammer you. And now your business name is in the news and there's potential fines and penalties, which once again, I don't know if they're insurable or not. You don't want to be in that position. Okay. Now you start adding in, depending on your particular business, federal laws, sector laws, trade group laws, all that type of stuff. It's a minefield. The easiest answer there is obviously you could always speak to a qualified attorney to get their formal opinion. But from my perspective, I'm more concerned with saying, hey, make sure that you have reasonable cybersecurity controls in place. Take this threat seriously. And then any additional requirements you have, you could already check that box, or it won't be that big of a lift for you. All right, this is just an example to show you Texas, Florida, Oregon, Montana, Iowa, Delaware, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Tennessee, Minnesota, Maryland. This one is Indiana, and then Kentucky at the very bottom there. So these are just upcoming state law changes. I bet you had no idea these were coming. The ones coming up here in 2025, I haven't even read yet. So you don't want to get blindsided by this stuff. Now we have to worry about class action claims after a cyber event. And these things are expensive. Your name gets in the news. It makes you look bad. You don't want to be in a position where, hey, you had a cyber event. Maybe nobody knows. Or the public at large doesn't really know because there's, 340 some odd million people in our country. Somebody needs directions to your office or they want to go to your website. So they do a quick internet search for your business name. Boom, there's your webpage. Right below that, breach notification, such and such got hit. Okay, that doesn't look good. And then right below that, maybe Attorney General launches investigation against your business. And then below that, law firm of, XYZ is launching a class action claim against your business. Suffice to say, I don't think that person is going to be your client, and we don't even know what those potential losses could be in a monetary sense. Now, here, the scale of data breach class action claims exploded, direct quote, in 2023. I wrote an article for the CPA Journal back in 2019 where I said, hey, you don't have to worry about that stuff. They're only going after, billion-dollar businesses, et cetera. That has changed. All right. That has changed. So now here's another thing you have to worry about. If the bad guys aren't coming after you, or if they already got you, now you could have the attorneys coming after you, as well as the regulators coming after you. They also mentioned that generative AI will make class actions easier. So that's going to be a problem. I think here in 2024, we're probably already outpacing what happened in 2023. They mentioned that over 45 new data breach class action claims are filed every single month. Now, let's assume you did everything right. You might still have to go to court, spend a ton of cash just to get that class action claim thrown out so that it's not certified, et cetera, et cetera. All this stuff is going to cost money. It's going to cost time. It's going to cost stress. And you don't want to have to deal with that. This is from Dwayne Morris Class Action Review 2024. And maybe some of you guys are wondering, hey, what could a class action claim actually cost my business? One insurer that I spoke to about this, they're obviously very cagey with numbers, but they said, hey, minimum, you're looking at $900,000 for defense and damages awarded. They also noted if that class gets certified, we're pretty much going to get tanked. So we're going to try and settle this thing and get out the door as quickly as possible. So take that for what you will. But if you already dealt with the cyber event, what's that going to cost? We don't know. And now you could potentially have $900K, potentially millions in additional damages going out the door. I hope you have enough cyber insurance. But the easy answer was avoid it to begin with. Speaking of running out of insurance, here you go. I wish I could sit here and tell you, hey, for your class of business with this many records, here's what a ransomware event's going to cost you. This is what a data breach cost will be for you. Here's the probability of a class action claim. Here's the probability of attorney generals coming after your business. I don't have that information, and I nerd out on this stuff pretty hard. Okay? So what will the cyber event cost you? We don't really know. There's a lot of variation here. Next, will an exclusion in your policy be triggered that you didn't know about beforehand? It might. What are the odds of a class action claim brought against you and at what cost? We don't know. Keep in mind, you could already have the stress of the event proper, and now all of a sudden you think you got over that 6 months, 8 months later, now you got a class action claim. Now you got to worry about, okay, it's going to be another 8-9 months till we go to court for the initial meeting. So there's a bunch of stress there. Please don't let this happen to you. What impact will negative publicity have on revenue? Very, very difficult to forecast that. What will existing and potential clients think? Once again, case-by-case basis. But what I will tell you is your largest clients are already being courted by somebody else because obviously they're large clients. If this just pushes them over the edge, you could have a big monetary problem on your hands. Will regulators launch an investigation and what cost? We don't know. I can't even tell you that stuff's insurable. All right. And then, of course, who's going to pay if you guys just blow through all of your insurance, right? Once you hit that limit on your insurance policy, man, for all intents and purposes, your insurance company's out and now you're footing the bill. Okay. So you don't want to be in that position where you got to talk to the other owners of your business or you got to talk to your spouse to say, hey, our savings account is about to get drained here. Now, intra-breach stressors that business owners never think about if they've never gone through this event. Man, contractual issues, we're seeing that pop up more. Who's going to report the claim? Who's going to review and validate engagement letters from attorney, forensics, public relations, crisis management, the call center folks, the forensics accountant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of this takes time. It is obviously taken away from your business, and it is exceedingly stressful because you've never done it before. Then you could have the question of, well, who bought this policy? I've seen this happen. Why didn't you get more insurance? Why didn't you get insurance for this thing? Or why didn't you increase this sublimit for this particular widget over here? You don't want to be in the hot seat there. How long will you be down? Man, it just depends. Are you an accounting firm and 3 days before the end of tax season, everything just craps the bed and now you've got nothing to do? That could be exceedingly painful and costly for you. Once again, what will our clients think? I see this going down a lot where you see big, tense discussions between partners to go, okay, what are our clients going to think? Yes, maybe we're sending out breach notification letters, but for our biggest clients, we need the partners on the phone in their offices, talking to these folks, going on site, making sure that everything is good at that with that relationship. You may have spent 20 years building up that relationship and it gets destroyed in a day. Now, are we going to be in the news? Man, that stresses out a lot of people. Moving on, post-breach stressors. Any exclusions in the policy that got triggered? You may not know until after the whole initial thing goes down. They pay for it. Now they want some in part or total reimbursement for what they paid out for you. Will you be sued? We don't know the odds. Will regulators come after us? You could be non-renewed. New insurers are going to demand higher security from you. So now you got to deal with that on top of all this other stuff. Your existing insurer is going to want to know, what have you done to avoid a similar event from occurring in the future? So you're going to have to put those controls in place anyways. All right. You don't want to be in that position. I said it before, where all of a sudden you got to shell out a ton of cash. You got to, pay overtime to your IT folks to get them in there to crush through those particular controls, to get them in place, to validate it so that we can send it to the insurer. They can come back with any additional questions, and you might just have a period with no cyber insurance. And that would be very, very bad for you. Moving on here, internal threat actors and supply chain attacks. Man, these are hard to deal with, and they're becoming more common. So rogue employees, very difficult to defend against that. You got to talk to your IT folks. You got to talk to your MSP about how you could try and limit the damage of those rogue employees. Next, very questionable if a rogue employee impacts your network that your cyber insurer is going to foot the bill. I think internal controls are your best bet there. Next, supply chain attacks and external outages. Once again, very difficult to defend against. We don't know if that widespread event exclusion is going to come into play. That might just tank you right there. Highly sublimited coverage at best. So this is where you got to have those internal controls and those internal fallbacks. That's going to be your best bet there. As well as third-party risk management. So TPRM. Big insurers for very large companies are taking a much closer look at supply chain risk management. And suffice to say, it's going to start trickling down into medium and eventually small-sized businesses. So what's my synopsis after speaking to you folks? Hopefully you're still here. Listen, you can increase your security the easy way or the hard way. All right. I would much prefer that you do it the easy way. So let's not talk twice in a year. All right. And just remember, cyber insurance has its place, but it's the reserve parachute. It's when all else has failed, you pull that handle and that reserve parachute comes out. But hopefully you never even have to get to that point. If you're wondering, where do you go from here in terms of talking with your IT provider, just go to those guys and say, hey, where am I at? What are the threats? What's the biggest bang for the buck? How do we start knocking this out to make sure that our business is going to be safer and less likely that you have to talk to me twice in a year? All right, guys, with that diatribe, thank you for sticking with me. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Right above me here is another video that YouTube will recommend from my playlist. And if you click over there, you can subscribe to my channel. All right, folks, with that, stay safe.